Support from your colleagues wasn't forthcoming, was it? Particularly at the press conference, because when she refused to answer that key question, the next journo didn't say, please answer the question. They went and asked some stupid question that gave her a way out.
Yeah, look, it was extraordinary, Rita. Look, in many ways, we're used to politicians and bureaucrats not answering questions, but the reaction of other media is extraordinary. I was very polite to them and let them get the news of the day questions into the press conference, of course, but I wanted to pursue a couple of points. And as you say, at one stage, one of the questions I was really keen to get an answer from Nicola Spurrier on, she refused to answer and said it's a minor point. That happens to be the national vaccination threshold at which we can open up the question that dominated National Cabinet today, the question that Nicholas Rees wants answered immediately. And she said that was a minor point. And when she refused to answer it the second time, she just went to another journo for a question. Now, I would have thought journos interested in a bit of transparency and accountability might have said, well, actually, no, Professor, I don't want to ask another question till you've answered that one. But it wasn't like that. On Adelaide Radio, I was accused by a 5AA host of a verbal assault on the Premier and the Chief Medical Officer. It's extraordinary. You heard the whole thing. I mean, I just asked them a bunch of questions. Look, I tell you what, it's all of a piece with what you've just shown us with the police in the Southern Highlands and elsewhere, and that is there are a lot of things going on in this country under the guise of the pandemic that absolutely destroy my image of what this country is about. It's not Australia. It looks more like Gilead at times.
It absolutely does. Nicholas?
Yeah, Chris, I want to get your take on this phenomena, I guess, we're now seeing, where we've got medical experts, they're in the media every day, they're giving their take on things, but it seems to be that there is more than one truth around what we should be doing. So the one that really struck me was the situation on Wednesday where you had, Jeanette Young as the Queensland Chief Health Officer telling people, do not take AstraZeneca, do not do it, and telling people to take their life in their hands if they do so. But then you look at the former Commonwealth Deputy Chief Health Officer Nick Coatsworth, who seemed to be out there suggesting that, look, it was quite a reasonable risk to take, or an infinitesimally small risk, and all things considered, perfectly fine thing to do. So we're now in this situation where there are experts, and I'm not trying to discredit them as experts, but they're experts giving us different opinions on what we should do. What do you make of this?
Well, I think it's the way it's always been, right? When you go see a doctor, if you're talking about something serious, you get a second opinion. So you've got to weigh these issues up yourself. I was actually talking to a GP this week who was looking at all the data sent to him, and we were discussing what would he advise a young person with AstraZeneca. So people have to be informed and make their own choices. I think what Jeanette Young did was bell the cat on their fear campaign about coronavirus for young people, because she was saying the tiny sort of one in more than 1 million chance that you could get blood clots or die from AstraZeneca was a bigger risk than coronavirus. So she belled the cat on their own fear campaign. Both risks for healthy young adults here are absolutely tiny. And that's the key point that I wanted to challenge people like Nicola Spurrier on. Unless you're over 70 or have some other medical vulnerability, the coronavirus threat to you is not a dire one. Yes, we've got to take it seriously. Yes, we don't want it running rampant through the community. Yes, we've got to do all these things, but most of those over 70 have had the chance to get a vaccine now. Over 70% of them have had their first shot, yet we still have people running hysterical fear campaigns.
One more. Well, what I've been really appalled with, and we saw it here in Victoria until really Peter Credlin went to the 100th press conference, and a couple of days later the state's top bureaucrat had to resign. And what we saw there with your exchange is that these public health officials who've got enormous power are not actually being questioned and scrutinised the way you'd expect someone in that position to be during a time like this. I mean, that fault doesn't lie with leaders or bureaucrats, that's with the media.
Yeah, I agree. I think the media, generally, it's in malaise around the country in many ways. They don't want to take up these points and have these arguments. It takes a bit of work to get across the facts, of course. You can't argue with the experts unless you're well informed. But, of course, media is stressed and strained these days, and they're mainly focused on just getting the news of the day. So they have some sympathy for that. You know, they just want to find out what's the latest developments, feed that out there. But the politicians and the bureaucrats feed off on that, and they don't want to get involved in a discussion about the big issues. In the end, the problem here is the politicians hiding behind the health bureaucrats. Now, they can't just say they take health advice and implement it. The whole reason we elect politicians, their whole job as an executive power is to take advice on all sorts of different issues and decide the path forward. I mean, if you were just taking medical advice, we would have shut the country down and stayed shut down, because that's the way to eliminate any transmission. But there's an economy, there's societies, there's communities, there's education. So you've got to factor all these other things in. And that's not the job of the medicos. That's got to be the job in the end of the politicians, surely.